Welcome to this virtual tour of the old Supreme Court, a collaboration between local artist Eugene So and the Singapore Academy of Law. Our journey back in time begins on the Padang, where we can enjoy a good view of the historic Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was completed in 1939 and stood as a symbol of truth and justice, as well as a monument to the success of the British colonial empire. The building has 4 wings surrounding a central courtyard, capped by a dome that allows light in. There were originally only 4 courtrooms, but as Singapore grew, this building eventually housed 11 courtrooms with another 12 in the City Hall next door. Frank Dorrington Ward, Chief Architect of the Public Works Department, designed and supervised the construction of this building. Mr. Ward also designed Clifford Pier, Hill Street Police Station, Kallang Airport, and many other buildings of historical significance in Singapore. This is the tympanum. The lady in the center is Justice, from Greek and Roman mythology. Her scales represent impartiality, while her sword symbolizes power. On her left, a figure begs for protection, while the person on her right thanks her for benefits received. The tympanum was made by Rudolfo Nolli, an Italian sculptor who came to Singapore in 1921. These massive Greek columns were made not of stone, but of gypsum plaster by skilled Chinese artisans who came to Singapore during the Sino-Japanese War. Like the City Hall next door, the Supreme Court was built in the neoclassical style and was in fact the last of the great neoclassical buildings built in Singapore. As impressive as it looks, we had to build the Supreme Court on a tight budget of less than $2 million due to the financial troubles of the Great Depression. Let's head inside and I'll show you how we did it. Right in the center, there is the foundation stone. When it was laid in 1937, it was the biggest foundation stone in Malaya. Buried under it is a time capsule, which is to be retrieved in the year 3000 by smashing the stone. See these checkered tiles? They may look like marble, but they are actually rubber, made at the Singapore Rubber Works in Pasir Panjang. Besides being cheaper, they also absorb noise better than marble or wood. This commemorative plaque was unveiled at the opening of the Supreme Court in 1939. The court orderly Ahmad is our expert in ceremonial matters. Ahmad, please tell us about the opening ceremony.
Of course. The 3rd of August 1939, Governor Sir Shenton Thomas arrived at the new Supreme Court and inspected the Police Guard of Honor. The police band played the national anthem, God Save the King. 80 lawyers and 5 judges, dressed in robes and wigs, attended the opening ceremony. Sir Shenton then officially opened the building and handed the key of the Supreme Court to the Chief Justice, Sir Percy McElwain. Sir Percy was the 14th Chief Justice of the Straits Settlements. That meant that he was in charge of the courts in Singapore, Penang and Malacca, a very important position. Another important ceremony was the opening of the assizes, now known as the opening of the legal year. I'm going to need my mace for the ceremony. Now where did it go? Thank you. Did you know that this mace dates back to at least 1865? The mace and silver serpent-headed sticks were used on important occasions during the colonial period. Let's take a look at what the ceremony was like. First, the Chief Justice would inspect the guards outside the court. Then, the orderlies would walk into the court with the mace and sticks, followed by the judges dressed in ceremonial robes and wigs. The lawyers would line up on both sides. I wonder what it was like to wear those fancy wigs. If you look around, I think you might find one somewhere over there.
Excuse me, my name is Raja, and that's my wig. As you can imagine, it gets terribly hot. We had no air conditioning in the colonial days. Court attire was not the only thing we borrowed from Britain. The entire legal system was based on English law, and even the lawyers and judges came from Britain. There was no law school in Singapore, so Asians had to study in Britain if they wanted to be lawyers. Sir Song Ong Siang was the first Singapore-born Asian to be called to the bar. He won a Queen's Scholarship and studied at Downing College, graduating in 1893. Teo Soon Kim, the daughter of a rubber tycoon, was the first female Singaporean lawyer. She was called to the bar in 1929. Why is there a sack of rice in the court? Ah, I see. We're preparing for the war. Just a few years after the Supreme Court was completed, Singapore fell to the Japanese. Many expatriate judges and lawyers were taken to prison. Several locals were appointed judges and magistrates when the Japanese reopened the courts. Would you like to see a court document from the Japanese occupation? I think there's one over there. Thankfully, the Japanese occupation only lasted 3 years. The Japanese surrendered in the City Hall just next door to the Supreme Court, and we were back in business. How about taking a tour of the courtroom? See that bell there? The judges used it to summon the orderlies. Ring it, and Ahmad will tell us more about the court.
How may I help you? Yes, this is Court 1, used by the Chief Justice, and he has his office next to it. The first Asian Chief Justice was Wee Chong Jin, appointed in 1963. Would you like to know how he became a judge? Let's hear from him.
At that time, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years before I went on the bench, the Chief Justice was Sir John Wyatt. He was Attorney General in Virginia. But he had one characteristic which none of those who were before him had. He had no colour bar at all. In fact, he was very anxious to lead locals to take their place in the running of Singapore. And he used to say the time is coming very soon when the locals should be on the bench. John Wyatt, who sent for me, came straight to the point, saying that we had never had a judge of the Supreme Court from the local bar. He had been asked to sound me out whether I would accept to the Supreme Court bench. My first answer to him was, but I'm far too young. You're being brought up in the tradition of when you go on to the Supreme Court bench, you should be in the 50s. I was under 40, you see. And that's what I said. But he said, no, somebody has got to start, you see, to lead by accepting an appointment, you see, to the bench. Because the time would come when you will be self-governing and you have your independence. Singapore should have its own local judges, you see, local conditions and all that. So I said, I'll have to think about it. I have to consult my wife. I'm just starting a family and all that.
Mr. Raja, could you please tell us about that box there?
This is a jury box. Until the late 1960s, trials in Singapore were decided by a jury made up of ordinary Singaporeans with no legal training. They would consider arguments from both the prosecution and defense and decide whether the accused was guilty or innocent. When the jury system was abolished, the jury box became a press box where journalists would sit and take notes. Mr. David Marshall was famous for getting the jury to acquit his clients. But as a criminal lawyer, he was always under intense pressure. Let's hear from him.
And you know, the last day of a murder trial, I can't even eat. I sometimes can't even swallow a glass of milk. Bite half a sandwich. And when it's over, and there is an acquittal, it's like a cold shower, and I'm reborn.
What's that on the table? Oh, that's called the black cat. When the judge puts that on his wig, it means that he is about to deliver the death sentence, but it's no longer in use in Singapore. This is the witness stand where witnesses give their testimony. If the accused is the one giving testimony, he or she would be handcuffed to a bar. Before giving evidence, the witness has to take an oath to tell the truth. This is the dock, where the accused will sit and listen to the court proceedings. The accused is usually accompanied by a prison officer and is handcuffed to this bar. Do you want to know how the accused is brought to the dock? Click on the trapdoor.
Hello, I am Prison Officer Ahwat. When the hearing ends, I will open the door and lead the accused back to the basement. The basement area is called the lockup, where there are two separate cell areas, one male and one female, the prison officer's office and an interview room. Don't be afraid, let's take a look. These holding cells contain the bare necessities, just a bench and a urinal. They are not meant for overnight use. We hold the accused person here before the start of the trial and during breaks. The flush system is on the outside and can only be operated by the prison officer. This prevents the accused persons from harming themselves. This card outside the cell tells us some interesting facts about the accused. Cluster represents the area where he is held. In this case, it is Queenstown Remand Prison. S3 is the cell he is in. L stands for long sentence. If it was X, it would signify a capital offense, which probably means the death sentence. The number after L is the serial number of the accused. 05 represents the year, and COA or Court of Appeal is the court where the appeal is being heard. This is the loading bay. We use a black van called the Black Maria to bring the accused to the court from Queenstown Remand Prison or Changi Prison. Let's head outside. In 2005, after 66 years, the Supreme Court moved to a modern new building just across the road from the old court. The old courthouse and City Hall are now home to the National Gallery of Singapore. This marks the end of our guided tour. If you'd like to freely explore the rest of the old Supreme Court, choose Continue. If you'd like to learn more about Singapore's legal history, visit our web resource by choosing the Legal History option.